Today was a weird day in politics, in part because of some unexpected and some still unexplained news from the ghosts of vice presidents and would-be vice presidents past. We're going to be talking about this a little later on in the show tonight, but in the middle of the afternoon today, of course, we got this news that there was going to be a verdict in the John Edwards sex scandal / campaign finance scandal. That verdict ended up being a delayed verdict and then a partial verdict and then a deliberate verdict. But the long afternoon of uncertainty about that sort of brought the news world to a halt today. While everybody was trying to figure out what was happening in that sordid case, when it was going to happen, and then ultimately, once it did happen, what it meant. Meanwhile, though, as that saga was playing out and every newsroom in the country was riveted to that in confusion, while that was happening today at the White House, former Republican President George W. Bush and his wife Laura were at the White House, back at the White House, being hosted by President Obama and Mrs. Obama. They were there for the unveiling of the Bush's official White House portraits. Now, there was one strange thing about this ceremony and this event today. But did you actually see any of this as it happened? Again, it was weird because the news day ended up being so unexpected and following all these contours that nobody knew it was going to follow. But that event at the White House today ended up being kind of a comedy show. I said there was a strange thing about it, and I'll tell you what the strange thing was in just a moment. But did you see any of the footage of this today? It ended up being very funny.
Mr. President, thank you for your warm hospitality. Madam First Lady, thank you so much for inviting our rowdy friends to my hanging. I am pleased that my portrait brings an interesting symmetry to the White House collection. It now starts and ends with a George W. When the British burned the White House, as Fred mentioned, in 1814, Dolly Madison famously saved this portrait of the first George W. Now, Michelle, if anything happens, there's your man. I am also pleased, Mr. President, that when you are wandering these halls as you wrestle with tough decisions, you will now be able to gaze at this portrait and ask, what would George do?
Even his wife throws back her head and laughs at that one. I mean, whatever former President George W. Bush and current President Obama think about each other as politicians, everybody, including the President and the First Lady and the former President and the former First Lady, all seem to have a really good time at the White House today for the unveiling of these portraits. What would George do? Here's the strange thing about that very, very pleasant event today, though. You know when George Bush said, thanks for letting me bring all my rowdy friends? The people who he brought, the people who were there to witness the portrait unveiling, the people who came with President George W. Bush to this event today included his wife, obviously, his family. Karl Rove was there. Colin Powell was there. Condoleezza Rice. Donald Rumsfeld. Conspicuously absent, with no explanation as to why, was his vice president. No Dick Cheney. And no explanation as to why. And it's not like Vice President Cheney is in seclusion after his heart transplant. This is him post-heart transplant. He has been giving speeches. He has been doing specifically political speeches at Republican events. He's been making public appearances and public comments. He is preparing to host a fundraiser for Mitt Romney this summer. But even as almost every other bold-faced name from the George W. Bush administration turned up at the White House today for the comedic stylings of GW43, there was no Vice President Cheney. Mr. Cheney, if you'd like to talk about it, anytime. I am happy to have you here. Please call me. It's never going to happen. All right. But regardless of that, what I think is very interesting palace intrigue about who turned up and who didn't turn up today, I do have to say it's nice to see people from completely opposed political places, right? Be respectful toward each other, be appreciative of each other, and find something nice to say about each other. It is particularly nice to see that when something as fraught as a new presidential campaign is underway, especially this particular presidential campaign, which not only seems like it's going to be a very hard-fought one, but it started off from the very, very beginning in a very nasty and very inauspicious way. Do you remember what the very first campaign ad was of the general election this year? I mean, Mitt Romney technically just clinched enough delegates for the nomination now this week, but the first ad that he ran that wasn't against one of his Republican opponents, but was against President Obama. Do you remember that first ad and what the big scandal was about it? It was this ad. It was way back in November. Mr. Romney, still a month and a half away from the Iowa caucuses, but he was already going after President Obama. A November 2011 ad. And in this first anti-Obama ad, he went after President Obama in a way that was really blatantly, flagrantly untrue. It wasn't just some politics lie. It wasn't like a variant interpretation of some contested event or a nuance about something about which liberals and conservatives disagree. It was just a flat-out, run-of-the-mill, unambiguous lie. Here's the Romney ad.
We need to provide relief for homeowners. It's going to take a new direction. If we keep talking about the economy, we're going to lose.
That's what the first anti-Obama Mitt Romney ad of the general election campaign quoted the president as saying. If we keep talking about the economy, we're going to lose. Here's what President Obama actually said.
Senator McCain's campaign actually said, and I quote, if we keep talking about the economy, we're going to lose.
That's not politics. That's a lie. He was quoting somebody else. He was reading somebody else's words in order to criticize them. And Mitt Romney and his campaign edited the sound to make it seem like it was something that President Obama said for himself. That is not just standard political slime. That is an outright schoolyard lie. And it's kind of crazy to think that you would get away with that, right? When the ad first came out in November, the initial response, even in the Beltway, was that this must be some sort of mistake. They would have to correct it, right? But no, Mitt Romney meant it. The ad is still up, still running at Mitt Romney's YouTube page. They never took it down. They never corrected it, even after they got caught. And when Mr. Romney was asked about why his first ad was blatantly lying like this, he was not embarrassed about it. He insisted that his campaign meant to edit the ad like that. It was on purpose.
There was no hidden effort on the part of our campaign. It was instead to point out that what's sauce for the goose is now sauce for the gander.
Online idiom dictionaries, just so you know, say that the sauce for the goose thing is the old-fashioned version of the saying, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, which you might have heard in normal life. Mr. Romney says it the old-school way about the goose having a sauce. In any case, that's how he responded when he got called out on his very first anti-Obama ad with this huge lie in it. He never apologized. He never corrected it. He's still running it. And he said that weird thing about the goose and a sauce. That was his first anti-Obama attack ad back in November. But today, Mr. Romney went back to the goose and the sauce thing again. This is David Axelrod on the steps at the state capitol in Massachusetts. He is trying to give a press conference about the Obama campaign's new focus on Mitt Romney's tenure as governor of Massachusetts in the early 2000s. Mr. Romney criticized the Obama campaign for previously focusing on his time at Bain Capital, his time in the private sector. And so the Obama campaign is essentially saying, fine, you don't want us to talk about Bain Capital? We won't talk about Bain Capital for a while. Let's talk about your public sector experience. Let's talk about what you were like as a governor. I know that's what the Obama campaign is trying to do now because I saw the ad that the Obama folks put out today. I saw the written press materials saying this was their Obama campaign message today. But anybody who just went to hear David Axelrod talk about it in Boston today instead did not hear any of that. Instead, what they heard was this.
You can't handle the truth, my friends. That's the problem. You can handle the truth, you quiet down.
That was not an organic, grassroots, spontaneous pro-Romney crowd there. yelling at David Axelrod. They later had vuvuzelas out, like from soccer stadiums. They were blowing bubbles. They were just doing the chanting together and the screaming. It wasn't an organic thing that happened. It wouldn't in Boston. The Romney campaign actually admits that it sent those people down there from the campaign to drown out David Axelrod at the press conference. Mr. Romney personally admitted to that today, and that's when he went back to the goose and the sauce thing.
At some point, you say, you know what, sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. If they're going to be heckling us, well, we're not going to sit back and play by very different rules. If the president's going to have his people coming to my rallies and heckling, why, we'll show them that, you know, we conservatives have the same kind of a capacity he does.
Again with the sauce. The idea of the sauce that tastes good on all of the geese, not just on the one goose. It is delicious goose sauce from many geese. I love it. The Obama campaign had let everybody know in advance, not only that they were going to be pivoting broadly to this issue of Mr. Romney's tenure as Massachusetts governor, but they also did let people know well in advance that David Axelrod was going to be at this specific press conference at the Massachusetts state capitol today. And the Romney campaign, so they knew this was coming. They knew this was going to happen. And the Romney campaign apparently cooked up two strategies for trying to distract what the Obama folks were doing today. Their first strategy was literally just to drown out David Axelrod so people could not hear him speak over the din. It's kind of a mini Brooks Brothers riot on the steps of the Massachusetts state capitol. But the Romney campaign also had a second strategy to distract from what the Obama campaign was doing today, to not really respond to it, but to hopefully change the narrative and do their own thing. Their other strategy today, besides trying to drown out David Axelrod, is they also sent their own candidate himself to do a simultaneous stunt on the West Coast. So while the George W. Bush portrait unveiling thing was going on and being unexpectedly hilarious and charming, and while the nation's newsrooms were frankly riveted to the prospect of this John Edwards verdict that nobody understood, and while the David Axelrod thing was being drowned out by Romney campaign aides and staffers, I guess, who were sent there, while all that was going on, what the Romney campaign was trying to get people to also pay attention to was their big campaign stunt of the day. The Romney campaign told reporters that the reporters needed to get on a bus because they were going to be going somewhere with Mitt Romney. But the campaign would not say where they were going. When the bus finally arrived at its destination, it turns out they were at Solyndra. Solyndra, the solar energy firm that received a loan from the George W. Bush-era Energy Department investment program to try to incubate alternative energy technology. But then the company went bust. Republicans tried for more than a year to make the Solyndra story into a scandal for President Obama. But it didn't really work. Even their top attack dog in the House on this subject, Congressman Darrell Issa of California, he eventually concluded that there seems to have been no real criminal or political wrongdoing in this case, and congressional Republicans have sort of dropped it. They tried to make this a big deal. They tried really hard for a long time. They had a lot of help on the subject from Fox News, but they really never got anywhere with it. Now Mitt Romney is trying again. He tried it again today. This is their message of the week, I guess. And they tried it today in a big way with this stunt, with the reporters in tow not knowing where they were being brought.